Okay, so this is the review and preparation for your Chapter 2 test. It's broken into sections, and we'll go through them together. Your test will be very similar to the review sheet here, so if we study through this review sheet and watch this video several times, we should be great and prepared for the test. Our first section is one-step equations. You have a single equation, we have to isolate the variable given. Isolate meaning to get it by itself. Step 1 says to identify the operation in the equation, whether it's addition, subtraction, division, or multiplication. Once we figure that out, like looking at our first equation, I have d plus 10 equals 22. So that shows addition. I'm going to use the inverse operation, or the opposite, to solve. So to eliminate a plus 10, I'm going to subtract 10. But when we solve equations, you want to keep your equation balanced. So you have to subtract 10 from the left of the equal sign, as well as on the right. My positive 10 and negative 10 are going to cancel, which leaves us with d equals 22 minus 10 is 12. So I've isolated d is by itself, and it equals 12. That's a one-step equation. Our second one is w minus 5. This equation shows subtraction, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. My negative 5 and plus 5 will cancel, and we're left with w equals 30. W is by itself. The equation is solved. The next one is 4d equals 16. This is multiplication, 4 times d. So to undo that, I'm going to divide both sides by 4. My 4's cancel on the left, and we're left with d equals 16 divided by 4 is 4. The last equation on the right here says x divided by 6 is equal to 3. To undo division, I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. On the left-hand side, my 6's will cancel, and we're left with x equals 6 times 3 is 18. The second section we have is two-step equations. Our first step is to use the inverse operation of addition or subtraction. So in our first example, I have 4x plus 7 equals 23. To get rid of a plus 7, I'm going to subtract it from both sides. 7's will cancel, and we're left with 4x equals 23 minus 7 is 16. Step 2 in our two-step equation process says use the inverse operation of multiplication or division. So right now, we have 4 times x. That's multiplication. To get rid of it, I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. My 4's will cancel on the left, and we're left with x equals 16 divided by 4 is 4. In the second example here, I have a minus 10. 3y minus 10 equals 20. I'm going to add 10 to both sides. My minus and plus 10 will cancel, and we're left with 3y is equal to 30. Just like in the last equation we saw, this is 3 times y. So I'm going to undo that or use the inverse operation of division. Our 3's will cancel, and we're left with y equals, so y is by itself, it's isolated, 30 divided by 3 is 10. Y equals 10. Our next equation says s divided by 2 plus 12 is equal to 16. To get rid of a plus 12, I'm going to subtract it from both sides. My plus and minus 12 will cancel, and we're left with s over 2, or s divided by 2, is equal 16 minus 12 is 4. To get s alone, it is currently being divided. The inverse operation of division is multiplying. So I'm going to multiply both sides of the equal sign by 2. The 2's will cancel, and we're left with s equals 4 times 2 is 8. For our final two-step equation on the right-hand side, we have a divided by 3 minus 9 equals 5. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. My negative and positive 9 will cancel. we're left with a divided by 3 is equal to 5 plus 9 is 14. Just like in our last equation, to get rid of or to undo division by 3, we use the inverse of multiply. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. Our 3's cancel, and we're left with a equals 14 times 3 is 42. Our next section is multi-step equations, but there's a few different types. Our first one is distribution. That means there's a number outside of a grouping with parentheses. I'm going to draw my arrows from my 3 to every term inside the parentheses. Those arrows are going to represent multiplication. So 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times 4 is 12. That's going to equal 36. From here, it's a normal two-step equation just like we were solving in the previous slide. So I have plus 12. I'm going to undo that with subtraction. We're left with 6x is equal to 24. Remember, 6x is 6 times x, so to undo that, we use the inverse of division. Our 6's will cancel, and we're left with x equals 24 divided by 6 is 4. Now, our next equation on the right says 100 is equal to 10 times the sum of b plus 5. So, I'm going to draw my arrows from my 10, and the 100 will stay for now. 10 times b is 10b. 10 times 5 is 50. To get rid of a plus 50, we're going to subtract from both sides. Remember, the goal is to isolate b and get it by itself. 100 minus 50 is 50, and that equals 10b. Remember, just like in the previous equation, this is 10 times b, so I'm going to use the inverse of division. My 10's will cancel, and we're left with b equals 50 divided by 10 is 5. Moving on to our next section. We have multi-step equations, but with giant fractions. So in order for me to access my numerator, the 2x plus 5, remember the goal is to get x alone, I need to get rid of a giant division by 3. The inverse of division is multiplication, so I'm going to times by 3 on both sides. We're left with 2x plus 5 is equal to 9 times 3 is 27. Again, we have broken it down to a two-step equation, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. Our 5's cancel, and I'm left with 2x is equal to 22. This is 2 times x. Remember, our inverse is division. My 2's will cancel, and we're left with x equals 11. We isolated x. That is our solution. I'm going to follow that same process for the next two equations. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4 and cancel my 4's. So 7b minus 2 is equal to 10 times 4 is 40. To undo a minus 2, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Our 2's cancel. We're left with 7b is equal to 42. Divide by 7 on both sides. And b is equal to 6. In our last equation, we have 30 equals 5k minus 10 divided by 2, so I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. 30 times 2 is 60, and that's going to equal 5k minus 10. We'll add 10 on both sides. And we're left with 70 is equal to 5k. To isolate k, we're going to divide by 5. And we're left with k is equal to 14. Next, we have multi-step where we need to combine like terms. So using our steps here, step 1 says combine like terms that are on the same side of the equal sign. Once we do that, we can follow the steps for two-step equations. So I'm going to identify those like terms. We have a 3x and a plus 5x both on the left side of my equal sign. I can combine those. 3x plus 5x makes 8x. I'm going to bring down that plus 10 since we didn't use it, and I'm also going to bring down my equals 26. We have a normal two-step equation where I subtract 10 from both sides, which leaves us with 8x equals 16. I'm going to divide both sides by 8. And now x is equal to 16 divided by 8 is 2. Now on the right-hand side, we have more like terms than we do in our original question. On the left-hand side of the equal sign, I have a 10 plus 14. On the right-hand side, we have x and plus 3x. We also have plus 3 and plus 5, or a positive 3 and a positive 5. So I'm going to combine this. 10 plus 14 gives me 24. That's going to equal. This x is a 1x. So 1x plus 3x makes 4x. And 3 plus 5 makes 8. So our equation is 24 is equal to 4x plus 8. We're going to subtract 8 on both sides. We're left with 16 is equal to 4x. To isolate x, I need to divide both sides by 4. And I'm left with x equals 16 divided by 4 is 4. Next, we have multi-step with variables on both sides of the equal sign. Now, the step that I've shown you in class is to draw a line through your equal sign. Now, this is going to help you keep your equation balanced. Notice, I have a 6x on the left and a 4x on the right. They're on different sides of the equal sign. So unlike the last section of questions, I cannot combine them. I need to move one over using inverse operations. As of right now, this is a positive 4x. I would suggest moving the smaller of the two numbers. So to get rid of a plus 4x, I'm going to subtract it from both sides. 4x is canceled. 6 minus 4x makes 2x. I'll bring down my plus 20, and that's going to equal 100. Now we have a normal two-step equation again. So plus 20, I'm going to subtract it from both sides. So we have 2x equals 80. We divide both sides by 2, and x equals 40. On the right, again, we have 4b and a negative 2b, but they're on different sides of my equal sign, so I need to move one over. This is a minus 2b, so I'm going to add it to both sides. And the 2b's will cancel. 4b plus 2b makes 6b plus 5. That's going to equal 41. Again, a normal two-step equation. I'll subtract 5 from both sides. 6b equals 36. We divide both sides by 6. And we get b equals 6, because 36 divided by 6 is 6. The last portion of this exam is going to be rewriting equations in terms of a different variable. So if we look on the left-hand side, we have y plus 10 all over 4 is equal to x. So as of right now, this equation is in terms of x. What we're being asked to do is solve it in terms of y. So I need to isolate, which means get by itself, my y. Just like before when we dealt with giant fractions, I need to undo them by multiplying both sides by 4. 4's will cancel. We're left with y plus 10 is equal to 4x. To undo a plus 10, I'm going to subtract from both sides. And we're left with y equals 4x minus 10. My y value is alone. We've solved the equation for y, or rewritten the equation in terms of y. So that is perfect. Y equals 4x minus 10. On the right-hand side, again, we're going to multiply both sides by a 10 to get rid of that giant fraction. And we're left with a minus 20 is equal to 10b. We are solving in terms of a this time. So we need to add 20 to both sides. And we've gotten a alone, so a equals 10b plus 20. Moving down to the bottom here, we have two more. U equals 2x minus 2. I need to get x alone. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. We're left with u plus 2 is equal to 2x. I'll divide both sides by 2. Make sure you divide the entire left-hand side by 2. And we get x equals u plus 2 all over 2. We could simplify further and make this u over 2 plus 1 equals x. Okay, our x is now isolated and it's alone, so we have solved that equation and rewritten it for x. The last one, they want us to solve for c. So we could do a few things first. We have a positive 3b and a minus 2. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And we're left with w plus 2 is equal to 3b minus 2c. Again, this is a positive 3b, so I'm going to subtract it from both sides. 3b is not a like term with w or 2, so it stays by itself. So this is w plus 2 minus 3b is now equal to negative 2c. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. And we're left with c equals w plus 2 minus 3b all over negative 2. Okay. Remember, if we review this for homework and we go over it, you will be fine and fully prepared for your test on Chapter 2, Intro to Equations.